On the warm evening of August 29, 2015, the quiet hills of Bristol, Tennessee, echoed with a terrifying sound. It was around 5:45 p.m. when a local resident jolted awake to the sound of gunfire. Now, in this part of Tennessee, hearing a few gunshots wasn't all that strange. Hunting was common, and most folks didn't think twice about it. But this time, something was different. Nestled deep in the rolling hills of Sullivan County, Tennessee, down a narrow, winding dirt road, sat a quiet home at the end of Henson Road. It wasn't much, just a double-wide mobile home tucked between trees and silence. But to the Rose family, it was everything. The land belonged to Curtis and Lena Rose, a couple who had spent decades building a life there. It wasn't unusual to find multiple generations under that roof. Children, grandchildren, even visiting friends, all sharing space in a home that had grown to fit them. This was rural Tennessee, the kind of place where neighbors lived far apart enough to enjoy their own peace, but close enough to hear when something goes terribly wrong. On any other day, the sharp crack of a gunshot might not raise alarms. It was a hunting area, after all. The sound was familiar, normal even. But on that day, it wasn't a couple of shots. It was a rapid burst, one after the other, too many, too fast. Then came the worst sound of all, absolute silence. That kind of silence that makes your chest tighten. Something wasn't right. Just down the road, inside a double-wide mobile home on Henson Road, 3 people lay dead. A mother, a stepfather, a grandmother, and 6 children, terrified, frozen, and untouched, had just watched it all happen. What happened that day would change the course of so many lives. Another neighbor, Darrell Gray, was sitting outside when he heard the same burst of gunfire, 10 to 12 shots, quick and sharp, slicing through the quiet evening. Then came the sound that twisted his stomach. Someone was screaming. It didn't last long, maybe 30 seconds, maybe less. And then, like someone had slammed a door shut on the chaos, it was quiet again. But what Darrell saw next would stay with him forever. A man came racing down the gravel driveway of the house at 618 Henson Road. He looked panicked, even desperate. He was running toward a car, trying to get away, and right behind him, another figure, an armed assailant, raising a weapon and firing more shots. Darrell watched, stunned, as the man finally made it to the car, jumped in, and the vehicle roared off, kicking up dirt as it sped away. Something terrible had just happened in that house, and the nightmare was only beginning to unfold. Just minutes after the gunshots fell silent, the property was swarming with flashing lights and armed officers. The scene inside the home was nothing short of horrific. 3 adults, all fatally shot, and 6 young children, some hiding, some crying, all too shocked to speak. Inside the home on Henson Road, 3 generations lived under one roof. It wasn't just a house. It was the heart of a family, built on 40 years of marriage, late-night dinners, hand-me-down toys, and second chances. But on that evening in August, everything changed. Lena Marie Rose, 57, was the matriarch, the kind of grandmother who had seen it all and still found ways to keep her family close. For 4 decades, she had stood by her husband, Curtis Rose, building a home not just with bricks, but with love, hard work, and the kind of strength only time can forge. She was steady, she was quiet, and she was the one who held the family together. She died inside that home, her home. Her daughter, Tosha Milhorn, 39 years old, was a light in that household. People described her as joyful, easy to talk to, and always smiling. She was a mother of many children, 2 children with her husband James, and more from past relationships. But the number never really mattered. If you were hers, you were loved, no questions asked. She had married James Milhorn about 4 years earlier. Together they were trying to give their children the kind of home every kid deserves. Tosha didn't make it out of the house either. James Milhorn was more than a father figure. He was a hero in his community, an EMT and firefighter. He had spent years rushing into danger to save others. He had a love for old cars, tools, and greasy hands. A fixer through and through. He was found on the porch, still breathing but barely. He died later at the hospital. One more life gone. But maybe the cruelest part of all, 6 children were inside the house when it happened. Some were Tosha and James's. Others were from earlier chapters of the family's life. One was just a friend visiting. The youngest was barely out of diapers. The oldest, just 7, was hurt but survived. And while none of them were seriously harmed by bullets, they were all wounded in ways that don't show on X-rays. They heard the screams. They saw the blood. They felt the earth shake beneath their tiny feet. They lived, but they would never be the same. And then there were 2 in the family left to tell 2 different versions of the same horror, Curtis and Seth Denton. Curtis was the man with the gun, following the boy running away from the house bearing shots released from Curtis's gun. But he had a reason. This boy Seth had killed his whole family, so Curtis had all the right to kill him too. So which one was the villain? In the days after the shooting, Curtis Rose's version of events shaped the entire investigation. A grandfather discovered his daughter, son-in-law, and wife shot dead. A grandson standing nearby, pale and shaken, telling him, "Call 911. Something terrible has happened."
My attention, I really tapped on the side of the trailer, like what? But he got my attention.
What did he say?
He said to call 911.
And where did he go?
He went down our driveway toward the road, and he kind of walking. He wasn't running, but he was walking fast.
Okay.
I put the saw down and everything. I went in the house.
Okay. And then what happened?
My daughter, she was slumped over she was on the table, slumped over at the table.
What did you do next?
I go through the house looking for Marie, my wife.
You see her?
No, I didn't see her nowhere. And I finally went back from my bedroom back into the living room, and I seen James. He was laying on the front porch. I don't know if he hollered at me or what it was, but he got my attention. I went in to the kitchen and I found her between the table and the refrigerator.
What was her condition?
She was dead.
What about your daughter, Tasha? You realized her dead when you saw her?
She was dead. After I seen my wife, I went to the bedroom to get a gun. I got in the van and I went down to the bottom of the driveway.
Why?
I was going to kill him.
Then the chase. A wounded suspect, a discarded rifle, a devastated family. Police had what they needed, or so they thought. But when the case finally reached a courtroom 3 years later, something shifted. Seth Denton, now older, quieter, still marked by the scar on his arm received from the gunshot from his grandfather's rifle, told a different story, and his version didn't line up with his grandfather's at all. It wasn't just about who shot whom. It was about what happened before the bloodshed, the tension inside the house, the years of conflict, and a family dynamic that was far from normal. According to Seth, he wasn't the monster the police believed. He claimed that Curtis had misrepresented what truly happened that day, painting him as the villain while hiding his own role. While Seth admitted to owning the rifle and carrying ammunition, forensic details raised eyebrows. Both Seth and Curtis had blood on their shoes. Multiple witness accounts pointed to Seth's long-standing hatred of his mother, even saying he had once talked about wanting to kill her. But was that enough? The courtroom became a battlefield of conflicting testimonies. One man was lying. Either the grandfather who chased down his grandson and claimed to be the hero, or the grandson who insisted he wasn't. The truth? Still tangled. Because even after all the evidence, the witnesses, the tears from the surviving children, and the final verdict, the one thing everyone walked away with was this: not all family tragedies are as clear as they seem. And once this house that now looked like a graveyard was filled with love and laughter, away from the evil shadow of the villain hiding amongst them. For years, the case seemed simple. Police believed they had the facts. They had a man wounded by gunfire, a rifle found near the home, shell casings that matched the bullets, and a grandfather's clear-eyed story of horror and heroism. But in the courtroom, everything started to shift. As the trial unfolded, Seth Denton's version of the story finally saw the light of day.
They told me that she had a house or a trailer somewhere else. I don't remember specifically, but she told me that she wasn't there. I was under the impression my mother was not there.
And what he described didn't match what the world had been told for the last 3 years. His words clashed directly with those of Curtis Rose, the only other adult survivor of the tragedy.
Because I thought he was going to kill me. That's what was going through my mind at the time.
Okay. Why'd you think that?
Well, because I just saw him shoot my mother. So that's just what I assumed.
Each man sat in that courtroom and pointed to the other, not with their fingers, but with their stories. One of them was lying. The jury just had to figure out which. Yes, Seth admitted he had bought the rifle used in the killings. Yes, he had ammunition on him when police caught up to him. But there was more. Both Seth's and Curtis's shoes were found to be stained with blood. That detail alone opened a crack in the case wide enough for doubt to slip through. It meant that Curtis, who said he was outside the whole time, might have been inside the house where the shooting happened.
Give the rifle to your grandfather.
It was some point during the course of the conversation. I'm not 100% certain.
And then what happened?
I followed him into the house, expecting that we were going to go see if he has any ammunition or if he's, that sort of thing.
If that was true, then what else wasn't? Curtis claimed he had simply found the bodies and chased Seth out of fury. Law enforcement believed him. His version that Seth entered the house, carried out a rapid execution-style attack, and fled. This became the foundation of the investigation. But now, with conflicting testimony and physical evidence painting a more tangled picture, the prosecution's case wasn't as airtight as it once seemed. Who really pulled the trigger that day? Why did two men from the same family tell two entirely different stories? And most chilling of all was the truth still hidden behind loyalty, fear, or something worse. As the courtroom filled with quiet tension, the prosecution began to peel back the layers of the 19-year-old Seth Denton's life. And what they revealed wasn't just anger. It was hatred. Cold, long-standing, dangerous. Witness after witness stepped forward. Friends, neighbors. One of the first and most heartbreaking testimonies came from a young child who had been inside the house on the night of the murders. Small and soft-spoken, she took the stand with a composure that silenced the room. Her words were steady, unwavering. She had seen what happened, up close. Her account was painfully clear. Seth had entered the home, and then the gunfire began. Her testimony cut through the noise. She hadn't heard secondhand stories or seen crime scene photos. She had lived it, and her memory, untouched by agendas or strategies, became one of the prosecution's most devastating tools. But it wasn't just the child's voice painting this picture. The prosecution began tracing Seth's mindset, showing that the shooting hadn't been random or spontaneous, but something that had been simmering for years. A former roommate described how Seth often spoke about the deep rift with his mother.
He said he wanted to kill her.
Did you say how he wanted to do it?
He said he wanted to go on a rampage. Yes, I don't know if he ever said that over instant messaging or anything, but I definitely remember him saying it.
You never looked back to see if he did you?
No.
No further questions.
But you know he said it verbally to you one-on-one.
Yes.
No question about that.
No, yeah, he definitely said that.
It wasn't the usual kind of family tension. This was a hatred that seemed to grow heavier over time. He talked about it openly, about wanting to hurt her, about the rage that lived just beneath the surface. Another friend stepped forward next, revealing that months before the shooting, he and Seth had gone together to a military surplus store. Seth had purchased 2 high-powered rifles, a Turkish-made Mauser and an American M1 Garand, both relics of war, chosen not for sport but with purpose. The two shared an interest in World War II reenactments, but something about Seth's intensity lingered. What stood out most, however, was what happened after the murders. On the very day his family was found dead, Seth made a phone call to that same friend. His tone, according to the friend, was strangely calm, almost reflective. He thanked him for being a good friend and hinted that something had snapped. No panic, no fear, just a flat, hollow acknowledgement of what had happened. Then came the forensic evidence. A TBI agent testified about the DNA testing performed on the weapons and clothing recovered that night. The results were grim. The M1 Garand rifle, though showing a mixed profile, had Seth as its major contributor. A camouflage jacket, one Seth had worn, was stained with blood. The tests revealed exactly whose it was: Toshia Milhorn's. His mother's blood soaking through his clothes. It was the kind of evidence that didn't need further elaboration. Between the testimony, the phone calls, the threats, and the forensic trail, the prosecution had created a narrative that was impossible to ignore. It wasn't just a matter of who could have done it. It was a matter of who had prepared for it. The child's memory, the friend's warnings, the blood on the jacket, and the rifle on the table all pointed to one person. And even if the defense tried to paint another version of the story, one truth began to rise above all the noise. Seth Denton had been heading toward this moment for a long time.
You just hand him the gun.
Yes.
Okay. And then walks through the back door, and you're walking behind him, and you don't even make it out of the laundry room.
No.
And bam,
Yes.
gunshot.
I heard the bolt close first. I turned around and I ran back to the bottom of the driveway.
And when the jury heard it all laid out like that, the threats, the timeline, the motive, they believed it. In their eyes, the story was no longer complicated. There was going to be a sentencing for the 3 lives stolen, 6 children scarred, and 1 family shattered forever. In the chill of early 2019, nearly 4 years after a nightmare unfolded inside a modest home on Henson Road, the trial of Robert Seth Denton finally began. The courtroom in Sullivan County, Tennessee was packed. Family members, law enforcement, reporters, and quiet neighbors who had once heard the screams, they were all there. Everyone searching for the truth, everyone bracing for the pain. For the prosecution, the case seemed clear. They told the jury that on August 29, 2015, 19-year-old Seth Denton walked into his family's home with a rifle and a dark purpose. Within minutes, 3 people were dead: his mother, Toshia Milhorn, his stepfather, James Milhorn, and his grandmother, Lena Marie Rose. 6 children, his own half-siblings, and 1 family friend were in the house. They saw it all. Over 8 intense days, the prosecution laid out every chilling detail: photos of the crime scene, testimony from investigators and EMTs who described blood-slick floors and the stunned, silent children, medical experts who spoke about the victims' injuries with clinical precision and emotional weight, and witnesses who testified that Seth had often talked about his mother with hatred. He hated her, they said, deeply, repeatedly, and he hadn't been quiet about it. They presented threats, not once, but many times. Statements where Seth had said he'd kill his mother, even take out her entire family. For prosecutors, that motive was the glue that held everything together. He'd planned it, he'd armed himself, and he'd carried it out. But then came Seth's defense, a story far more tangled than the one the state offered. Seth took the stand. He spoke calmly, but not without emotion. He admitted to buying the rifle, yes. He admitted to having ammunition on him, yes. But the murders? He said he didn't do it. According to him, he had gone to the property that day to practice shooting with his grandfather, Curtis Rose. They had done this before, target practice behind the house. But something was off. Seth claimed he heard a shot from inside. He ran in and found his family already dead. Stunned and terrified, he panicked. He ran. He said Curtis was the one who pulled the trigger, the grandfather who had lived with the victims, the man whose own wife, daughter, and son-in-law were among the dead, the same man who told police he chased Seth down and fired at him in a fit of rage. The defense pointed out the inconsistencies. Both Curtis and Seth had blood on their shoes. Some details in Curtis's story didn't line up. Was he really in the trailer out back the whole time? Why had he waited before calling 911? And why did he shoot at Seth without trying to stop him? In the end, the jury was left with two clashing narratives and a house soaked in tragedy. One man was lying, but which one? What made this trial different wasn't just the horror of the crime. It wasn't the 3 bodies or the 6 children who witnessed it. It wasn't even the family torn apart by bullets and blame. What made this case unforgettable was what no one said. Because through days of emotional testimony, through hours of forensic evidence and family grief, not once did Seth Denton's defense team look the jury in the eye and say, he didn't do it. They couldn't. Or maybe they wouldn't. Led by attorney Ricky Curtis, the defense built their case not around innocence, but around doubt. Instead of standing firm on Seth's innocence, they pointed fingers at someone else, his grandfather, Curtis Rose. They laid out a different version of events, one where Curtis might have been the one inside the house when the shots were fired. It was a strategy that unnerved some and convinced others. Seth Denton, the boy-turned-suspect, took the stand himself. He told the court that he had gone to the property that day to shoot targets with his grandfather, that he heard a gunshot, ran inside, and found 3 bodies, that he ran out of fear, but even his story never directly denied that he pulled the trigger. Instead, the defense leaned into the fog, into what-ifs and might-have-beens. They didn't need to prove Seth was innocent. They just needed the jury to wonder if someone else could have done it. After the testimony, the jury delivered their verdict: guilty on all counts. On March 7, 2019, Seth Denton was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus 5 additional years. The judge described him as a danger to society, stating that the nature of the crime, the number of victims, and the trauma inflicted on the surviving children demanded the harshest punishment the law allowed. For the families of the victims, the verdict brought a complicated sense of relief. Justice had spoken, but the cost was unbearable. 3 loved ones gone, a family torn in half, and 6 children left to carry memories that no child should ever have. The defense vowed to appeal. They argued that key evidence, possibly even truths, had been lost in the confusion of that bloody evening, and that Curtis Rose's role had never been fully investigated. But for now, the case was closed. Still, the town of Bristol remembered, because this wasn't just a murder, it was a family, shattered from the inside out. A question of truth that split bloodlines and rewrote memories. But in a case where the truth was as sharp as the violence, one question still lingers. What kind of person looks their own family in the eye, then pulls the trigger anyway? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you've made it this far, be sure to check out this next video. I think you'll enjoy it. Thank you once again for watching.